Any normal parent would pull that up, look at it and be like 4.4. I don't know what 3 means. I
But I'm
don't know
not
what
getting
1
any
means.
alerts. I'm not being
Yeah.
told by anyone.
It must be fine.
So it must be fine.
We weren't really paying attention or taking ownership of it ourselves. Instead, we were like, oh, if no one's telling me anything's wrong, I guess nothing's wrong, which was apparently a really bad approach. I don't know why we didn't assume that this was also happening with the medical system, but the focus of this system is not on patient outcomes. It is on bureaucratic compliance and ass covering and justification of bureaucratic structures.
What I want to do here is take this opportunity for not just for our family, but for the network of families that makes up our community. This is something you can join if you're like, my family would benefit from this. But what we also need to make this realistically implementable for us is like-minded medical professionals who are interested in
Providing concierge medicine,
a new
essentially.
type of telehealth, basically, where they're much more like a thesis advisor. By that, what I mean is the patient can't just decide on anything themselves. They need to then take all of their research to the doctors, say, here's this study, here's this study, here's this study. And I think as a result, given these symptoms or given this, I should be prescribed X, which again creates reasons for value-aligned families to group together and support each other as the bureaucratic infrastructure of our society is beginning to break down. Because it is. It's not just the school systems. It's not just the infrastructure that's falling apart. Civilization is essentially falling apart around us.
Would you like to know more?
Hello, Simone. We are coming into this episode. I will start with mentioning and ask for anyone who fits this criteria and doesn't make it to the end of the episode, but we are looking for values-aligned individuals, with MD, so value-aligned doctors, and we're likely going to create a list for different states for our listeners to directly contact them. But obviously we would really love one either outside Pennsylvania, but preferably within Pennsylvania due to some prescribing laws. But the reason we need to make this ask is that we have completely lost faith in the, I guess I'd call it bureaucratic medical institutions in the United States and largely in the world, because I lost faith in the NHS when I was living in the UK. And I was like, at least in the US, because it's profit driven, et cetera. And now I have realized that I should have been putting as much stock in these institutions having my children's best interest at heart as I had put in the school system having my children's best interest at heart. And that these institutions in their own way have become as corrupted and as useless as the public school system, and are becoming increasingly more so as time goes on, to the extent where if your kids are going to just an average doctor down the road, I would say that I would not trust that they are safe. So do you want to go into the events that led us here, Simone?
Sure. Yes. It all started with a bat that we found crawling around in our yard. Octavian ran up to Malcolm and said that our dog, the professor, was barking at something scary. And Malcolm, being the ever attentive dad, did not dismiss this and went outside to check on the kids and saw our dog barking at what seemed like the ground. But it turned out that when he looked closer, there was a bat crawling along it. And so we put the bat in a giant goldfish box and put a sign on it that said live, potentially rabid bat, called the government, found the government testing location. Malcolm drove forever to drop off this live bat, which a government bureaucrat was pretty dismissive about.
I know they were like, oh, okay, I'll put it with the mail. And I was like, don't put that with the rest of the mail. It's like there was a live rabid. And I told them when I dropped them off, this is a live, potentially rabid bat.
And there was I wrote on the box.
Yeah, no, and the lady was like, oh, okay. And then she said it was the rest of the packages. And I was like, excuse me, ma'am. I said that is a live, potentially rabid bat. And then she seemed to have this moment of recognition where she goes, oh, and then she picks it up and takes it to the back of her home. But
and we thought nothing of it when we dropped it off, because what are the odds? We know the odds that this was going to be a rabid bat. The odds were about 1% or even less than that this would be a rabid bat. So we thought, okay, great, better safe than sorry. And then wait. And the 24-hour period passes of exposure. So by the way, if you ever are exposed to a rabid animal, it is very important that you, especially if you've been bitten or you've been in a scenario in which potentially spit or brain matter from the bat has gotten into your mouth or an open wound, within 24 hours, you have to get a rabies vaccine. or the odds of you contracting rabies and then dying from it, because if you actually contract rabies, it is 100% fatal. It is a brain virus. You are going to die. You have to go. So we're a little nervous with a 24-hour period passing before knowing that this bat was tested. Government's taken a while, but we're like, yeah, government bureaucracies, what are you going to do? And then finally, at the end of the day on Friday, we received this message that the bat was rabid. The bat was rabid. It was a rabid bat. And we grilled our children. And our eldest son, who's old enough to report on these things, insisted that nobody touched the bat except for the
professor. Middle son who can talk competently. And I went out there immediately. I do not think that there was the odds of exposure are incredibly low, but now we know we have rabies in our yard. So we're like, okay, it's good that there was no exposure. The dog notified us.
God bless the professor. Dogs are amazing.
Yes. So bless the professor, because it was right next to their playground, right?
At the base of their slide. Like literally, if one of them had gone down their slide of their little play fort, they would have butt first right on top of the bat.
We're like, okay, so we know there's rabid animals in our yard now. We should because there's the big rabies shot that you can get, which is the post-exposure shot. And that seemed like overkill given the information we have. But the course of action here would be, okay, don't get the post-exposure vaccine, but get the prophylactic vaccine. Mm-hmm. So the prophylactic rabies vaccine is for if you are going to be encountering animals with rabies, or if there's rabies in your area. It provides some boost, but it's not as severe as the post-exposure vaccine. Go through our ordeal attempting to get the prophylactic rabies vaccine. Yeah, and keep in mind, this isn't the only story. There's the rabies story, and then there's another story that happened immediately afterwards that was even more obscene.
So we call our kids' pediatric practice, which is one of those, it's many doctors, many nurses. There's no one doctor. It's not this tiny family practice. We do that because we think that ideally we thought they functioned better, had better resources. And they tell us, oh, okay, we'll send this message on to a doctor, because we could only call them on Saturday. The office was closed when we first learned of this, and that we wouldn't be able to get an answer from them until Monday. And then they would look into it on Monday, which is bad, because when you're trying to get vaccines for your kids who've been potentially exposed and also just prophylactically protect them, you want to do it as soon as possible. So that was already pretty bad. Then on Monday, we call again.
And this was their emergency line, by the way.
Yeah, this was their emergency line.
Okay, continue.
And then so we... Oh, here we go. Sorry. Then on Monday, we called them multiple times saying, hey, our kids were exposed. This is really urgent. This is a big deal. We really want to get those vaccines ordered. If you have to get them in, obviously you don't have them in stock.
Long story short, to not make the story boring to our audience, we eventually learn that legally, whoever owns them won't let them prescribe rabies vaccines.
Or order them. Yeah, that under no circumstances are they to give people rabies vaccines. And what they just told us repeatedly, every single time, was go to an emergency room. We call the emergency room, and the emergency room says, oh, we don't give prophylactic rabies vaccines. So already they're basically telling us we have to lie to them if we want to get vaccines, but they do have the vaccines if we want them. But we have to pay an emergency room fee. The last time we did this, because we were actually exposed to a bat that was in our house while we were asleep, so we don't know if we were bitten or spit on or something. We had to go in and get them. We paid over $10,000 in emergency room fees. And
then the question is, if it had been a real bat exposure and some family was trying to do the right thing, talk to their doctors first, they would have dismissed them for a week before giving them the answer that they had just decided legally they don't want to give out these vaccines.
Yeah.
That is enough time that somebody would be past the period of which a post-exposure vaccine would help them, and they would die.
Yeah.
And
we called urgent care clinics. We called every possible channel we thought we could call. They would maybe have them.
But it gets worse than that. So then less than a week later, our little girl goes in for her 18 months, and she gets a lead test. And I tell her, if there is any lead in her system, and I was very direct about this. We actually have evidence that I was direct about this that we'll get to in an instant, but give me a call if there is any lead in her system at all. Okay. We don't get a call, of course, because they don't care. They genuinely do not care about the well-being of our kids. But Simone was able to proactively look up what the results of the test were. And it was 4.5. Now, the number at which we would get a call would be 5. That's where they legally have to call us. However, 4.5 is more than twice the national average, which is
around 1.6. Yeah.
at that age. This is when you're talking about long-term IQ effects, and we need to do something about it. And we have developed our own plan to work this out, and our kid will be fine. But they wouldn't have told us. They would not have told us. And they were going to not tell us. This is horrifying, but it just shows that they're not legally required to. They're not going to do it because they are not looking out for your kid's long-term best interest. And then I told someone, I was like, there must be something new in the house because they would have told us with our other kids, because we went and we found the old medical records. They even had a doctor's note. Dad is very concerned about lead. He wants us to tell him if any comes up in the test.
Yeah, like literally it said in clinical notes from previous appointments when our kids got lead testing, Dad requested a call with results.
But
So
they
not
obviously
even if
didn't
they
do
were
that.
above the threshold, just any
So
result.
I assumed that they were not, no lead at all. We go back and we look at the old results, 3, twice the national average. So now we're at this state where it's 4 years. And when you know something like lead and the effects of lead in IQ, this now we've got to, because they'd be like, oh, we won't give your kids the type of stuff associated with getting lead out of their system, et cetera, unless they're over certain numbers. We're just like, you know what? We can no longer trust the medical system anymore.
And also because you would probably ask, if you are looking at the results of your appointments, why didn't you identify the 3, like when it was at 3?
Oh, yeah. Why didn't we identify this? So the way they sent the results didn't send markers. It didn't send national averages. It was literally nothing. It was just
it was just 3,
Well,
and it was just
4.5.
4.5. Yeah,
You
and it
only
also
found something
included
out
a
because-
little tooltip icon in the online system that they have. Click through to it, and it basically said a disclaimer, but it didn't actually provide information on ranges, what the national
Yes,
averages are.
You put that into, you then searched for national averages, you went through AI, everything like that, and you're like, oh shit, like this is actually a problem.
But any normal parent would pull that up, look at it, and be like, 4.4. I don't know what 3 means.
But
I
I'm
don't know
not
what
getting
1
any
means.
alerts. I'm not being
Yeah.
told by anyone.
It must be fine.
So it must be fine. And now we are at this point where I'm like, okay, and we had already been moving to this system this year was in our house, which is to move to Ezra scans, which we've talked about before. These are for about $1,500. You can get a full body scan. They've got centers in major cities across the US, and they are incredibly detailed in terms of finding stuff.
Yeah,
So
basically they don't own the
full-body
machines.
scans.
They don't own the machines, but they basically are able to book a slot for you with various practices. That's why they're able to do this in many locations. And then their team goes inch by inch through your body and analyzes them, providing preventative healthcare, especially when it comes to cancer. Our plan is to basically get those. We also emailed Emmy Gall, who's the founder of Ezra, and because he's one of those quantified self, really conscientious health people. And we're like, okay, what blood tests do you order? Because we know what like Peter Attia orders. We know all these other things, but we want to know what you order and how you keep track of it, because he's that kind of person who's just going to know. And so he gave us, and we can put this actually in the comments or the description of this video, this blog post that he shared on all the blood tests that he orders. And also he has a spreadsheet template, which we now have copied and will be using, where you can keep track of your results over time so that you are personally tracking and charting your health. Because of HIPAA laws in the United States, at least, it's really difficult for you even to gain access to your medical test results and for them to be portable anywhere. So you don't have one comprehensive place to look at all of your medical information. You have to create that for yourself. So our plan was personally for us, for you and me, Malcolm, that we're going to do an Ezra scan every other year because they're crazy expensive, but we should probably do it because cancer, and to do comprehensive blood panels that we ourselves using AI analyze, because no one else is going to do it. We just have to get a doctor to order it and try to get as much of our insurance to cover it as possible, which is not going to be a lot because we have a high deductible plan because we're not wealthy people. That's where we were. But we didn't do it with our kids because we're like, well, our pediatric practice, they care about kids. No one's going to
They must care about the best interest of kids. Now I have learned they literally care nothing about your kids.
Here's what we learned, and this is ridiculous because it's the same thing that we knew about the education system. It's the same thing we knew about the governmental system. I don't know why we didn't assume that this was also happening with the medical system, but the focus of this system is not on patient outcomes. It is on bureaucratic compliance and ass covering and justification of bureaucratic structures, which is what you talk about in the Pragmatist Guide to Governance all the time. But yeah, patient outcomes, not at all the focus.
Yeah, I love the way you worded it, which is the medical system is not built around outcomes, it's built around liability and bureaucracy. And that is what's driving decisions within the industry right now. And that is not your best interest. That's not in your kid's best interest. But also, let's talk about, for me, right? You look at something like naltrexone, which is basically banned in the United States and is incredibly useful at
Yeah, that
finding.
there's literally a cure for alcoholism. There's a cure for alcoholism, but
Yeah,
doctors don't prescribe it because liability.
because
And really, the only
liability. Yeah.
liability is that naltrexone, by the way, is just it's a little hard on your liver. And obviously, if someone's an alcoholic, their liver's already gone through
Well, it's
shit.
actually partially AA has really lobbied to prevent it from becoming common, and
That
we could do
too.
a whole
That's too.
separate video on that.
Yeah.
Other solutions to alcoholism, because then the people become a quote unquote a dry drunk, which means they didn't solve the real issues that led to alcoholism, which for them is a lack of their religion, which means it's a religion, right? Like if there's a medical solution to alcoholism, which the original founder of AA said he was founding this as a stopgap until a medical solution became available. And now they're the solution that works in 83% of people who try it. The Sinclair method, it allows you to, if you want to keep drinking when you want to, just not be addicted anymore. And Simone, you've seen me night and day before this. I used to drink at least 45 beers a day. Or more for years of my life, decades of my life. And people are like, come on, you couldn't possibly. I love it when people are like, you couldn't possibly be drinking that much. And I'm like, you don't know my family history. You graduated with good grades from a Stanford MBA, constantly hammered. Yes.
You were never actually hammered or drunk. I think the fact was you drank beer like a man 200 years ago drank beer, which is to say that you drank beer flavored water, aka Coors Light, and you drank it constantly as though it were water, just like people used to, just like your ancestors used to. And so you never really were drunk because also your tolerance was insanely high. And I never, the only time I saw you drunk was when my mom did that whole wedding thing and had us get in that shaman
She
circle.
tricked me into a pagan wedding ceremony.
Yeah.
And
And then,
Simone
you
goes,
just switched to the hard stuff and you're like, I'm going to just, you drank yourself to oblivion. I
well,
don't
I
think
didn't
you
like
even
get
remember.
angry or anything. It wasn't like I got in.
No,
You
you were
could
just like,
tell
I
I
need
was
to
just trying to
not be
power
here.
through.
That's no, so there are different types of drinking. There's European drinking, there's ancestor drinking, which is what you did. And then there's frontier medicine where you're like, I need to knock myself out. Frontier medicine.
To get through a pagan ceremony without offending your parents.
Yeah, just yeah.
But anyways, the reason I bring up the naltrexone thing is I have learned like where I had saved myself from dying, and that almost certainly saved me from dying, was outside of the medical profession, and something that's not even talked about within the medical profession.
And it took you a long time to find that because there were many times where you tried a lot of other types of interventions and they just never really worked. And you always did tons of research. It took forever.
And then recently we had that ongoing back pain and you couldn't identify what it was. And the doctor should have known that epidurals can sometimes create these. And you found it on an AI.
Oh yeah. After my C-section, I was for a month, for 3 solid weeks in crippling back pain, like just turning over in bed caused so much pain that I would involuntarily yell, let alone moving, taking care of an infant, being with our family. And at first I thought it was just hormonal changes. And then I discovered it was almost certainly a complication from the spinal epidural that I got, which is just, it's not like anyone did their job poorly, but I'd emailed the practice about this. I'm like, wow, like I can't move without being in extreme pain. What's going on? They never called me back. They never emailed me back. They never responded. And they told me that was the way that they wanted to be communicated with.
So the point being is, what are we doing to fix this for our kids, for us? But I don't want to go into all of the maybe more experimental medical stuff that we may be doing as a family, because I don't want people like coming after us or anything like that. But what I'm going to be putting together is a document that goes over all of the most cutting edge research out there for different chemicals, different nootropics, how they might affect kids developmentally, things that we can do about the lead and things that start neural development again after they've already found some great options here. And it's still a low amount of lead, but it's way more than we would want. Like it's going to have an effect if we don't address it. And now we recently had a guy come test every part of the house for lead, everything, including the chicken eggs, everything. So we're going to have a full understanding of where this is coming from. Now, good news. It turned out we had all our kids tested, and the original multiple results were false positives, and that their actual lead levels were much lower, in line with the average American lead level. However, this is how, we sort of view within our theological system the agents of providence, or God, or the future police, or whatever word you want to use within our system works, is that they find a way to notify us in a way that we just can't ignore, that we need to change some aspect of our behavior. And if I don't change my behavior, if I don't go through with developing this new system and all of the other people it may end up impacting, the events still end up happening in this timeline. So we are now moving to a system of, Simone said, doing the scans, proactively looking at the cutting edge research that's not being implemented into practice yet, developing basically a mixture. I'm already beginning to put this together that we'll probably bake into some bars for our kids or something like that, or put in afterwards because it's overheated. It can destroy the active ingredients in a lot of compounds, but we'll come up with some delivery mechanism for our kids. I will make a lot of the information on our research public so other people can use these same things in addition to the Collins Institute, which right now, by the way, if you're interested, I need people who can go through it and tell me their feedback, because we're that close to launch right now. So let me know, anyone who's interested in that. Sorry, I should clarify right here. The Collins Institute is our alternative to the public education system that we have been developing and are close to launching. And also, we will be making this sort of medical stuff available. But what we also need to make this realistically implementable for us is like-minded medical professionals who are interested in
Providing concierge medicine,
a new
essentially.
type of telehealth, basically, where a lot more of what the patient is doing is being researched by the patient and then basically being brought and argued to the doctor. Basically, the doctor in this system takes on a different role than a doctor historically. They're much more like a thesis advisor. By that, what I mean is the patient can't just decide on anything themselves. They need to then take all of their research to the doctors, say, here's this study, here's this study, here's this study. And I think as a result, given these symptoms or given this, I should be prescribed X, instead of here's what's wrong with me. Can you prescribe me X? So
And to be clear, this isn't just experimental stuff. I created a spreadsheet where we are keeping track of basic blood work results, height, weight, blood pressure. Last time we had an eye exam, like last time we've done all the important things, because we realized that also because we assumed that the medical system would let us know if something seemed off, we weren't really paying attention or taking ownership of it ourselves. Instead, we were like, oh, if no one's telling me anything's wrong, I guess nothing's wrong, which was apparently a really bad approach. And it just feels really good now to just plan on not trusting anyone and monitoring our own stuff and making sure here are the vaccines we all are going to need. Here are, our latest tests. Here's what we're monitoring for each person that seems a little bit out of range or they could be a warning sign. And here's what we're going to do about it. Theoretically, I could also, once I've refined this massive spreadsheet format where there's like sheets for everyone in the family and like a master like check-in sheet and a master sheet of here's what resource to use for what, because there are many affordable virtual or urgent care options. There are many affordable alternate options that are not necessarily covered by healthcare that you can use for testing. I can share that too with people.
Yeah, and so what I want to do here is take this opportunity for not just for our family, but for the network of families that makes up our community. This is something you can join. If you're like, my family would benefit from this, let us know. And we are going to try to put together a network that connects like-minded physicians with families in our communities that want to take a lot more personal ownership over their own family's health and be much more aggressive nutritionally and everything like that speaking. And here what I mean is we are not the type of everything needs to be perfect for our kids sort of family, right? Like breast milk, for example, right? Simone pumped for a bit with this kid, but we're probably not going to be doing that again for the next one. It just slows things down too much. And people are like, oh, this has an effect. We are not about optimizing everything when there are costs to that optimization, i.e. when she becomes fertile again, etc. But we are about optimizing for everything when it is a trivial cost to us or our kids or something like that. And there were just so many low-hanging fruits out there that I was finding as I was digging into the research here. So I should say that we're not trying to create a network for like over-involved hypochondriacs. That's not the idea here, but it's a network of people who would be using medicine and medication as if the medical industry hadn't frozen 10 years ago in terms of its advancement, which is what happened. And again, I should have known all this. When I've been looking at more like trans affirming care stuff and stuff like that now. And it's like, if the medical industry was saying people should have been raising alarm bells about this a long time ago.
Yeah.
One reason I really like putting this together for our community and making these connections for our community is twofold. One is, not only does it help make our community safer and help get us access to more sovereignty, more family sovereignty. Two, if we are acting as intermediaries within this, there's not going to be some master list of physicians that public that people can target. It allows us to make connections directly, which is also much better. And three, it allows for an additional source of income for some people within our community. But I guess even four, potentially, is it provides the opportunity for something that could turn into something more formalized as things go down the road, which again creates reasons for value-aligned families to group together and support each other as the bureaucratic infrastructure of our society is beginning to break down. Because it is. It's not just the school systems. It's not just the infrastructure that's falling apart. Civilization is essentially falling apart around us. And only through creating bubbles where we continue to push science forwards, where we continue to push medicine forwards, can we have any faction of humanity hope to continue to thrive as a species.
Yeah, part of me wonders how other communities that have chosen to essentially go off the grid are handling this. For example, we know lots of people and journalists have covered how the Amish handle medical insurance, that they pool resources, they all pay towards something, and then the community covers when there's some kind of treatment that's prohibitively expensive, like getting cancer treatment. What I don't know is how they manage their ongoing health, how they decide to get vaccines, how they monitor or don't their various levels of hormones and their growth and their weight and their height, and should they be intervening, or what do you do when a kid has a rash? I'd be interested in learning that. Maybe someday we can trot off to Lancaster, however you want to say it, and then see what they do, talk with some families. I'm very curious, but yeah, I like that idea. I like the idea of promoting any concierge doctor who follows this podcast, who's up for working with values aligned people. And I'm just horrified. These are well-meaning people. That's the problem, is that we're not saying that the people within the medical establishment are malicious in any way. Every doctor that I personally worked with, my pregnancy and delivery and C-section, absolutely fantastic, including like the doctor who did my spinal. They did not do anything wrong. I just had a complication from it. And the office that didn't respond to my concerns and requests about crippling pain, they're working with dumb systems that don't work really well. And
what motivation did they have to respond? If they don't respond, then you go in for a visit and they make more money. Like, the incentive system that's put into place with a lot of these drives behavior patterns.
Mhm.
There is no reason to fix a problem like that, like people not responding to patient requests, from the perspective of the bosses or the management, when the outcome of that is more money. Like, with a lot of this, I think that what people get wrong is they think about these big conspiracies, like cancer medications are being withheld or discoveries because institutions can make more money. That's actually a lot harder to do because you have competing medical institutions, and one of them had it, they would use it to undercut their competitors. But when you're talking about something like a hospital, no, there isn't really the same competitive pressure for them to get back to you versus getting back to other people, because there's typically only one or two other hospitals in an area that they're competing with, and they're usually not competing on service. They're usually, the other crazy thing was when you started calling hospitals to try to find out how much a rabies vaccine would cost, and the answer was basically, we can't tell you.
Yeah.
What other thing in our society works that way, on a random hidden expense? And so it's better for us going forwards to just proactively manage this stuff ourselves and have a network that enables that.
And we know that we have an international audience with this podcast, and that there are different nations with very different healthcare systems. But when you have a nationalized healthcare system, you're often dealing with just as bad incentives, or possibly even worse, like you pointed out with the NHS. Then there are some countries that are great, like South Korea, where you get these comprehensive medical scans.
South Korea is amazing. I got to talk about a medical experience in South Korea. So I've lived in a lot of countries. In the UK, the NHS, my experience with the NHS, even as bad as all this expensive stuff is in the US that has me scared for my kids and everything like that, I still pray to God every day I live here and not under the NHS. The NHS basically, if you get like a flu or something like that, and then you try to book an appointment, the appointment is always 3 weeks out. So you're always better by the time you get to the appointment. If you have something serious, like I remember once I had something serious and urgent, and I called and they were like, don't get all emotional with me. I can't deal with this right now. And they hung up when I was at university and somebody was like dying on the floor in front of me. They're like, sir, you need to calm down. I just don't need to deal with this at 3 a.m. in the morning. Hang up. Like, what? But there's no consequences to this within the NHS. In Korea, though, they have this system where it's really inexpensive. Like in the US, everything's way too expensive because of the way our insurance system works. And if you just banned the whole US insurance system and made everything out of pocket, it would work much better. But that's the way it works in a lot of the developing world. And so we often get medical stuff done in the developing world when we're in Peru or whatever. But in Korea, it's like in the developing world, but it's also like totally industrialized. So like when you were doing like a test, you would sit down in one booth and somebody would ask you like a series of questions, and then you'd get moved to a variable set of other booths where they would do, there was like the blood draw line that was just like in, like you were walking in line, and it was a fairly fast line, and you get the blood drawn and they'd move you through. Like everything was just like lines and institutionalized, and it was insane. And then when you would get mildly sick and you'd go to an appointment, they'd give you like these breathers and stuff that had like anesthetics in them that were meant to make you feel better immediately, as well as prompt, inexpensive service. It was absolutely insane. And then there's childbirth in Korea, where afterwards women get
They go to these resorts, essentially, like a spa retreat with your baby, where they feed you healthy food and you get massages, and yeah, you basically get to chill and they take care of everything so that you can recover.
Anyway, I love you to death, Simone, and I really hope that we're able to put this together and that we get enough physicians. And we're very fortunate that this happened post-COVID, because post-COVID, like in PA, the regulations around people prescribing stuff out of state are significantly loosened. That's still true in a lot of areas. And if you win this race, this can be something that you work on to make it much easier for a system like this to operate without any sort of legal concern.
Yeah, I would like that. Yeah, and of course, none of this should be taken as medical advice. Just disclaimer,
It's
because
broken.
just like everyone else, we just have to cover our ass and worry about liability. But yeah, I just, if anyone has made it to the end, please if you could subscribe and like this video, because it will help the video. But also, like, actually think about your personal health. Think about anyone in your family and their personal health, and maybe consider making a spreadsheet where you just start to internally take ownership of it and track it. Because if you think that a doctor is keeping track of that and making sure that you're okay and then informing you of stuff that might be going wrong, you're probably wrong. Yeah. And we learned that the hard way. So love you guys, and love you, Malcolm, the very most of all.